The next story that you're reading is from Philip K. Dick, who is a prolific and sort of iconic science fiction writer, and that is We Can Remember It For You, Wholesale. He's also known for his very famous work to Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. And Philip K. Dick is writing in the 1960s. So E.M. Forster and the Machine Stops, it becomes part of the golden age, quote unquote, of science fiction. Now, Philip K. Dick, on the other hand, is more associated with what's called the new wave of science fiction, and this takes shape in the 60s and 70s, sort of as a jumping off point of some of the stuff that you read last week. And these writers were known for mimicking more non-genre styles, meaning this is also the era of the postmodernist movement. And postmodernism in literature or just in general is really hard to define, but postmodernism is essentially where, we have all these movements of literature throughout history that sort of follow these basic characteristics. And we can say, okay, the Romantics did this, the Modernists did this, the Realists did this. Postmodernism is where they say, okay, the postmodernists said, to hell with the rules, and just kind of did, started experimenting, really challenging the idea of what a story could even be. And so a lot of science fiction writers at the time are inspired by that idea. Now, in terms of our theme this week, which is, technology and the machine, this is an interesting story to read in that context, because this story deals with technology that allows us to supplant, replace, or alter memory. And that is an important concept, or a really interesting concept to be thinking about as you're reading this. So I want you to think for just a second about what memory is and how essential it is to our identity, right? Everything that you know about your life and everything that defines your experience up until this point, and will continue to in the future, is based in in memory. And what does it mean for a memory to be true? So there's phenomena with memory that we know to be really complicated, right? Things like the Mandela effect and false memories, and the questioning nature of whether memories can be real. And some would argue that memories are inherently fragile, right? They can be influenced by a lot of different things. But memories can also be a foundation upon which we build our identity. And the manipulation of those is very frightening for a lot of people, very unsettling. And that's sort of one of the things that this story deals with. Now, this is also associated with some other things that were going on in recent memory at the time Philip K. Dick was writing. So, we're not that far out of the post-war era. As a matter of fact, we would arguably still be right in the middle of it. And the memories of the sort of propaganda machine and the manipulation of thought during that period of time of totalitarianism, authoritarian control, those are things that also influence this idea of memory, or the sort of themes at play in this story. In addition to that, we have the space race going on at the time, which this technological achievement and, the idea of space travel is present in the story, and also reflective of, a part of cultural identity. There was a lot of advancements in psychology and psychiatry taking place at the time, particularly regarding the idea of the subconscious and how we store those sorts of things and how they influence us in various ways, and how we define what it means to be human. I mean, most literature is in some way concerned with the human experience, and science fiction and fantasy writing has a really unique opportunity to compare that to a non-human experience, right, or to an alternate human experience, which allows us to question those things in really interesting or sort of dynamic ways. Now, in addition to that, we have the general sort of counterculture of the 60s to consider. So the 1960s is a very sort of nation-shifting, tumultuous, prosperous, optimistic, pessimistic era. Very postmodern. But, you have this shifting of cultures, and this was influenced by a lot of things. Number one, the baby boomer generation was coming of age, and at the time they were the largest, it was the first time that young people had ever the generation of young people was larger than any other generation. So we moved from the 1950s of the Leave It to Beaver era to the hippie counterculture movement of the 60s. But it's not just that, right? You also have a lot of social protest and unrest related to war, to the Vietnam War, related to the civil rights movement, related to women's rights and, moving out to the second wave of feminism. We have all of these sorts of things that are this sort of concern with social issues, social equality, social progress. Counterculture was also a huge thing. I mean, this is the era of Woodstock and rock and roll and, sort of rebellion. And some would argue that particularly younger people or more progressive people during this period of time embraced rebellion as a sort of very glorified, high value, almost thing that made you a good person, was to be rebellious. And I'm not saying that that's counterproductive, but this idea of sticking it to the man or sticking it to authority was very popular at the time too. And that's another thing to consider in this story. Do note that this story was is the basis of the film Total Recall, both the Schwarzenegger version. The 2012 version is considered a remake. It didn't directly credit Philip Dick, but either of those versions would be possible options for your feature film comparison here in a few weeks.